Good afternoon and welcome to another edition of the CannaList Conversations. We are here today with Michael Sassono, who is the CEO of Somai Pharmaceuticals. Michael, how are you?
I'm great. Glad to be here.
Great to have you. So Michael, tell us a little bit about your background and how that led you to cannabis.
Absolutely. I was a banker and then real estate developer back in the United States. And somewhere around after the market of 2008 crashed down, we looked at some projects in the cannabis space, emerging projects in the cannabis space in California, back when you were only allowed to have 5,000 square foot indoor grows. And then throughout that time, I mostly carried an investor hat. And around 2015. I ended up building Solaris Farms and trying out the operational side and learning quite a bit along the way. And then as time went on, we merged with some dispensaries and we started to grow other states. And now here I'm in Lisbon building out Somai, which is a manufacturing facility located in Lisbon.
And tell us a little bit more about Somai.
So Somai is a large-scale manufacturing facility. We concentrate on formulations of THC-enriched products or other cannabinoids. Of course, we're exploring, some of the minor cannabinoids also. And our key focus here is delivery of the product. So whether it's oral drops, sprays, sublingual tabs, even if we can get into over here some of the vaporizer oils, transdermal patches, we're concentrated on fast delivery of the cannabinoid products.
And are these medicinal products?
This is pharmaceutical medicinal. Yes, these are medicines. These are registered APIs. This is the concentration. We're pharmaceutical.
And where are these products in the market?
Well, these products will be available in all the countries that allow it. I mean, some of our larger markets, Germany, of course, everybody talks about that, but there's much more interesting markets when you look at how like Italy is developing, how Poland is developing, how the UK is developing, Czech, Israel for sure is a target market. As these countries develop here in Europe, and they're developing quite quickly, we want to be able to address the needs of the patients in all of these countries.
And while you're talking about Europe, and we'll definitely come back to Europe, you also have a considerable presence in the US, right?
Yeah, that's correct. I mean, that's where, let's say I honed in my building skills and building the infrastructure for grows, dispensaries, production facilities, delivery. This is many years just accumulating assets and building them. I would say I kind of used my hat as a developer and understood that cannabis needed a tremendous infrastructure. So we address that concern. We build the infrastructure and operate these facilities to try to get the product out to all the people and patients.
And what are the primary differences between operating in the US and operating in Europe?
I mean, it's quite a big valley there. So, in the United States, as an example, of course, it's all recreational. There is very limited amounts of rules. It more conforms to food preparation. You don't have, like in the EU, you have EU GMP certification and pharmaceutical certification at that, because it's THC products. It's a narcotic. Conforming to those high standards is just like any other medicine that would be created on the market, whether you're talking herbal medicines, which is a little bit of an easier path where you have to prove, your quality and your stability. But on top of that, you have the path just like GW Pharma, Sativex, Epidiolex, where you're actually going through clinical trials and years of preparation to find a drug that can be prescribed with doctors. So, I mean, It's quite a big difference. In the United States, we build a facility and we're making money the next day. Here, we're building formulations and medicines, which will be out in a few years.
At a considerable cost, correct?
There's quite a different runway than in the United States for sure.
And where is your research coming from? Is it European based? Is it coming out of Israel? Where is it coming from to develop these formulas?
I mean, when you look at research, and especially like, let's stick to the THC side, there's 200 plus, maybe 300 different clinical trials in various different phases going on around the world. You have to be on top of all that. I've read every one of them. We're always in contact with different drugs that are being delivered. But on the other side, when we're creating certain products here, and I'm not talking about the longer term products for clinical trials, which would be AIM products. I'm talking ACM products, herbal medicines that are generally accepted. So there is a shorter path when you're looking at herbal medicines to get into the market. And that's your basic drops with THC distillate and CBD distillate that's not highly purified, 80% purity of elements. When you get to that area, a lot of what we can do in the United States, although we can't prove it out as a medicine in the United States, a lot of that technology we're bringing here to Europe. And let me give you, a quick example. In the United States, for the last many years, 3-4 years, it's about bioavailability in your system. Taking whatever it is, the chocolates, the gummy bears, vapes, these recreational products, but making sure that the bioavailability, gets into the blood system and you're getting those cannabinoids and getting the effect of that. That same technology that we've been developing for years can be used over here in Europe. And that's very key because we know from the US market, what's working, what taste is working. It's not just about combining THC or getting THC or combinations of THC and CBD. It's that whole combination of the experience, not the taste and those cannabinoids.
So your gummy doesn't taste like dirt.
Or like a liposomal creation.
Yeah.
So it has to be pleasant or people won't want it.
And obviously there's a considerable difference as far as what you can claim with an herbal product versus a medicinal product.
That's for sure. You have to, in Europe, you're proving out, and you're proving out in a clinical setting what your bioavailability is, meaning you're doing blood tests to get to that point. You're proving out that this was effective for pain, insomnia, whatever indications you're going. You have to prove those in order to be able to claim them, or you can't. You just can't make that claim without those clinical trials. In the US, you could, stamp it, fast acting, nano. These are terms that are used, but this is not the way it works over in Europe for sure. And it's just like any other medicine here.
And I know that you guys have been doing a lot of hard work, and this has been years and years in the making. What was your reaction to the CBD market when it came in as sort of this magical cure-all, making all kinds of claims, particularly health claims, when they sort of were flooding the market?
Yeah, I mean, it reminds me of that scene in My Big Fat Greek Wedding where Windex cures everything, just spray Windex on it. That's not the case. There is legitimate purposes for CBD. And you saw like Epidiolex from GW Pharma. They have multiple different indications, including multiple sclerosis and other nervous disorders that they're using it for. For sports people, high dosages to relieve anti-inflammatories. But as something recreational, something that's good. Sure, maybe as like a nutraceutical, like you'll pop your turmeric and your curcumin and other herbs. Why not add CBD to that mix of the many herbs that you take? I mean, there is a use for it, but the cure-alls, I'm not a cure-all believer.
Right, and it also speaks to the need for standards and compliance and labeling and all those types of items.
Yeah, well, definitely, definitely like you see in the US market, what was a good thing for CBD to have the Hemp Act legalized is turning into Delta 8, Delta 9, Delta 10, Delta 11. Now there's Delta O because O feels so good. So, I mean, that's the politicians are just, head down going, I hope this one doesn't get out. But states are addressing those laws, and Europe will have to address that at some point too if the derivations start coming up, because they're for sure psychoactive.
Yeah, and I mean, we reacted to the Delta 8s early on and said, this is bad. This is bad for the market. The fact that it's just a workaround or, a way to skirt the laws, which is potentially dangerous.
Well, you don't want to be taking that and thinking you could drive a car, normally.
Yeah, pretty much any sort of product that you can get at 7-Eleven is probably not something you should be relying on.
Definitely don't eat the hot dogs.
Exactly. Stick with the slushies. You'll be fine. So what made you guys launch in Portugal?
I mean, Portugal for sure. I've always lived part-time in the United States and the EU. So, to bring the cannabis knowledge to Europe has always been paramount for me. And many years, obviously, we've been developing this. And I'm Greek. We tried to work the Greek legalization when it started back in 2019. And we found that the legislation just wasn't there, and the support from the medical authorities really just wasn't there. And in early 2020, just before COVID hit, we moved the operations over to Portugal because basically Inframed's extremely reactive. They understand this industry. They want to be a hub for medical cannabis in Europe. Their rules are extremely beneficial because we can import flower from just about anywhere except for the United States that is legally registered in Portugal. And their understanding of cannabis and getting those medicines approved is the highest that I've seen so far in all of Europe.
And you guys are in Lisbon?
Yep, we're right in Lisbon.
Yeah, so there are worse places to live, right?
Yeah, this is great over here. It's fantastic.
Yeah,
and the people are fantastic, actually. And there's really a wealth of clinicians and a wealth of pharmacists, and everybody we work here. I mean, they're mostly all PhDs, or at least on their way to PhDs, and that's an incredible talent. Whereas when I kind of juxtapose to the United States staff, I mean, we don't have PhDs mostly on our staffs over there, even though our facilities were all partnered up with nerve clinic and doctors of that sort. The people that are working, they don't come with an education in pharmacy and pharmacological educations.
And just to clarify, Portugal doesn't have medicinal cannabis, is that correct? It's not legalized, or what's the status of medicinal cannabis in Portugal?
No, they for sure medical cannabis is legalized here. I mean, everything for one is decriminalized, so there is no criminalization of drugs here. But on the medical cannabis side, earlier last year, the first flower started getting approved in the market. And soon there'll be some extracts approved in the market we're hoping for. And also, Portugal, I mean, this is the third time it's come up. There is some sort of adult use that is being discussed and looked at for the market. So, Portugal's, is just like all the other countries. It's a little smaller than the bigger markets like Germany and Italy and Poland and UK, but it is a market, and they definitely want to combat the black market and make sure medicine is in the hands of people who want it.
And obviously, there's a considerable difference between decriminalization and legalization, right?
That's correct. That's correct.
And you talked about being a smaller market. there was all kinds of press a few months ago about Malta, and I'm like, who cares? There's 12 people in Malta.
Well, I mean,
apparently there's more than 12. I've been corrected several times, but I mean, obviously the excitement or the buzz is currently around Germany and as a bigger market and an opportunity.
yeah, I mean, for sure. For sure, when you look at it, Malta, it's a small place, but it's a positive development for our industry. They'll have social clubs with limited to 500 people, and then you saw kind of a pilot program in Switzerland where they'll issue 10 social club licenses where you can have 100, but now it's 150 applicants. You hear Luxembourg, they haven't really let out their program yet. There's rumblings of Spain this year. There's rumblings of Germany with the new government, even though they haven't figured out exactly how that's going to look or how it's going to relate to the single convention, the 1971 Narcotics Act. So, a lot of the smolderings are happening, similar to the United States when Colorado went legal. That was kind of the spark that lit it on fire.
Yeah, I always sort of equate Germany to sort of what's happening in New York, where they've announced this, but what people don't realize is this is a multi-year undertaking in order to roll it out, because you have to figure it out. You have to then create all the rules and regulations around it, those types of things.
Well, the politicians are definitely great at throwing that ball out there. And then chasing that ball is a whole nother object.
Right, but I mean, I think what happens also is the public thinks that means that it's going to be available tomorrow, and, and then what we know is that means like 3 years from now.
Yeah, I mean, look, there's a high positivity rate, 70% plus in most of these countries, and I think most people agree, most civilized people agree. This should be decriminalized, and the legalization path, as we've seen in the United States. I mean, I have 11 years of crying for legalization. So, and maybe it's another year, maybe it's another year. I've lost every bet every year.
And what makes, what are the other emerging markets? Or, you mentioned Israel. Talk about Israel a little bit.
Well, Israel's, I would say Israel definitely on this side of the pond is 5 times larger than Germany or any of the markets over here. They've advanced considerably, and of course that's on the medical side, but they have an easier medical path, right? So like you mentioned, New York, there were it was mostly very serious indications for the New York market, whereas Florida allowed their market to be medical. And you would have pain and other indications that were much easier. Well, Florida grew a lot bigger. That's very much similar to Israel and Italy now today, where if you have simpler indications like pain, you can actually get your product or have a choice of products. And that's that's beneficial because you juxtapose that to like the UK. In the UK, you have to have gone through whatever treatment you're looking for 3 different times, and cannabis becomes a option of last resort. And that's not really going to be a positive influence for the industry. It's about people being able to have that flexibility to try products, and it's not a one size fits all. So people have to be able to get a product at a reasonable price and switch a product. Well, that's kind of how Israel has developed their market, and that's where that's why it's grown so fast. And potentially there's adult use rec also on the tables there. They announced that last year, but as you point out, legislation is yet to be completed.
And when we look at these processes, one of the challenges is that the drugs and the taxes and the compliance make the legal product too expensive, and people continue to go back to the illicit market. What can you speak to it as to that?
Well, I mean, that's our let's say in the US, we would always say our biggest competitor is the illegal market. It's not our competitors in the market, because mostly the black market. They don't have to pay taxes. They don't have regulations. They don't have standards. They don't have any of this. And when you couple that with the decriminalization, well, nobody really wants to go arrest people for selling cannabis because it's decriminalized. So it kind of defeats the purpose. So, legislation, I think the industry, in one sense, the governments have to, keep that in mind. If you keep raising taxes on us, and like you saw in California, they pushed back and they said, look, we're not profitable and we're never going to make it if you don't decrease taxes. You have to be reasonable with the product, and your goal has to be, for everybody to have a safe product legally and make us competitive with the market. And that comes with, being available and growing the industry, and also, growing the infrastructure of the industry. There's an incredible infrastructure that's needed in order to kind of kick out the black market, because they've been leading for the last 20, 30 years.
And where is the medical community? Do they accept this as evidence-based medicine? Are they ready to prescribe this? Are they on board?
I think they're mostly skeptical because they're not educated, I think, for the most part, about the uses of cannabis. They're used to what they were trained in medical school. Here's the drug by Pfizer. This treats, this, and let's prescribe that. And here's the competitor from Sandoz, so let's prescribe that, when they come in with those indications. And there's nobody there to tell them, well, here's an alternative that's safer. Here's something that, instead of prescribing an opioid, this is a safer and less addictive pathway for that. So, I mean, clearly there is a need for some of the big pharmaceuticals, but clearly there's a space in there for cannabis. And it's going to be about, producers and everybody educating the doctors on how to do that. What you're seeing, though, in Europe is pain clinics and clinics for cannabis that are popping up, telemedicine clinics that are popping up, that are addressing this concern with doctors that specialize it, and the patients go to them directly rather than going to their GP and say, okay, I've had this pain in my shoulder for the last, X amount of years. I'd like to try cannabis. Well, they're just going to the clinics now and say, I want to try cannabis. This is my problem. Will this help me? And I think that's one of the areas where patients are now taking it into their own hands in Europe. And there is this growing clinicians that want to address that issue.
And as you alluded to, the farmers are watching this. So, does this mean that ultimately the farmers will take this over? What is the future of, big canna or big pharma in this industry?
Well, at the end of 2022, when the UN voted to make this make cannabis, deschedule cannabis as a medicine, you saw GW Pharma's buy at 6.7 billion with Jazz. And then at the end of last year, at the end of 2021, you saw Pfizer come in with another $6.7 billion purchase of a San Diego group that mostly deals with cancer treatments, that would go along with their array of cancer treatments. And so that was a direct fit. You saw C3 get bought by a German consortium. So that was one of the Canopy medical arm, because Canopy decided to go all recreational and shed the recreation, go all recreational and shed the medical. And then you saw Teva Pharmaceuticals jump in with a distribution deal out of Israel that should be expanding. I think what you're seeing is the age of pharmaceutical come, whereas recreational was always the forefront, and the bigger, let's say, elephant in the room as far as revenue in the United States, 20-something billion dollars worth of revenue last year, 26 billion. While now the recent mergers just in the pharmaceutical industry in the last year since the UN change, these are bigger than all the mergers that you've seen in the recreational space, barring Canada, 1.0, where there's just mega mergers all over the place.
And what does this mean as a roadmap for Somai?
I mean, this is the space we occupy. We occupy a unique space. We're dedicated to the manufacturing and building our pipeline of IP. We're dedicated to making exploration and R&D into the minor cannabinoids, different uses, CBG, CBN. This is an area that we occupy. And there's not many people that have that skill set, in Europe, or have addressed that higher value. Most of what you're seeing, you have, multiple grows, hundreds of applications for grows, and you only have a handful of groups that are doing extraction, but then you have even less people that are formulating and creating products and are dedicated towards the medicinal pipeline. This, you could count them on one hand right now. So, that's we're there for the pharmaceutical road.
So that either positions you as a target acquisition or, a public offering.
I think both are in the cards. This is, of course, the natural evolution. Europe has a big taste for it. They've been pretty much reconciled to CBD companies. We went through that CBD consolidation back in 2014, 2015, 2016 in the United States. Europe is definitely started in that way. They are trying to get their mind around what exactly manufacturing means. This is really brand new. Extracts just started appearing at the beginning of last year. If you look at any of the markets like Canada and the United States, clearly extracts and formulations are a large part of the equation. 2/3 of the entire industry, and then you have to kind of juxtapose that with doctors. They're not really used to prescribing something that you can smoke or light up. They want the pills, they want the drops, they want to know how to use them, and they want to be educated in this field. And that's one of our biggest tasks. We have to educate people as to these products and how to use them.
And how do you go about doing that?
It's a lot of hard work. I mean, it's old-fashioned door-to-door, getting in to talk to the doctors. They've been mostly closed off because of COVID. So this has been, for the educational point of view, a lot of Zoom calls during that period. But now we're getting back to the door-to-door talks and getting, getting the word out there, through the different pharmaceutical conferences that they attend. We have to put more effort and more money into educational programs for the doctors to draw them in. We're competing in a way against, an engine that was designed by big pharma, and they have a lot of money that they were educating people on their drugs. So the doctors are used to that certain path and how to, tell them about the product. Well, we don't have big pharma. The whole cannabis industry does not have the big pharma money, and we have to be a little bit more creative on how we reach the doctors to tell them about them.
And are the doctors going to these conferences?
They are. They're definitely. Let's say the population is growing slowly but surely. You see people with more interest. They have a lot more smart. The questions are a lot smarter. They're reading more information online, but it's still very jumbled. Information, like as an example, pain. Maybe there's a 30% effective rate on pain because some people, it amplifies the pain. So there's a lot of competing research out there, and nobody's really narrowed it in, for them to make concrete decisions yet. But there's a thirst out there.
And are you guys doing the conference circuit this year?
We're mostly on the pharmaceutical conferences, although I do speak at some of the cannabis centric conferences. I definitely will be talking at ICBC this year. We always talk at Cannabis Europa and the Prohibition Partners one. So, but mostly,
So
you'll
you won't be
find,
partying at Spannabis?
well, we have a grandfathered in booth, but that's more recreational, but that's
Okay.
something from the
It's a
US.
different type of event, obviously.
It's less Somai, even though, because it came from the recreational US side, our
Right.
Spannabis, but Somai kind of acquired that, but we don't have a use for it because we participate mostly in pharmaceutical conferences.
And so what else will you be focusing on for the rest of 2022 going into 2023?
Well, this year is we have like all of our launches. We have a complete the entire company is being rebranded right now. We're straying away from the cannabis centric side, and what you'll see is more of a pharmaceutical biotech company, because that's really the space that we occupy. So trying to tell launching the pipeline and trying to make sure that everybody knows what's coming this year, what's coming next year, what's coming the year after, what trials are we in. We want people and the doctors, especially, and the patients, to know when these products will be launched, and what kind of trials and results to expect going forward. So this is a really a transformative year for us.
And that's to clearly differentiate yourself from the recreational market?
Well, not just the recreational market, but also the cannabis market in general, to some degree, because what we are producing is medicines that doctors have to prescribe. And, your target audience is those doctors. So they know that, okay, look, current extracts in the market, they didn't think, they're in the 1.0 phase where they didn't think about bioavailability. Well, Somai's products are all the 2.0 with bioavailability, but what's our 3.0 is what we want to tell people about. What's coming after that? Why should you be following this array of drugs that will be able to help, a wide variety of indications? And we want to be able to, pick up some headwinds with sleep apnea. We want to be able to address not just, pain like everybody else, or where most of the studies are. We're looking at different indications like Crohn's and gastrointestinal problems. So, that story needs to be told because we want to address those indications for people, the patients that are looking for them.
And Michael, if people want to learn more about what you're doing, where should they go?
They're going to go to www.somaipharma.eu.
Okay. Michael, we very much appreciate your time today and thank you for sharing your insights. We look forward to exciting things from Somai, and we hope to talk to you soon.
Great. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Absolutely.